It's pretty good.
Yeah, that was pretty good.
That's good. Both of these have been really good.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Audio Link Podcast. I'm doing the intro. Surprise. Today we talk about drums and kids and rings of power, and with subtle but not subtle, but kind of subtle, political jokes.
Yes.
And we have lots of fun.
It's a great episode. It's about demystifying drums.
Yep.
Let's get into it. Vámonos. 3, 2, 1. That was pretty tight.
That was nice.
So, on to the most important point, which is why was my mic so much louder than yours
Hold on.
on the David Funk podcast?
No one needs headphones when they're doing a podcast because you're right.
Correct, because we're physically right here. There's absolutely no purpose for that other than disconnecting you from me, which is counterproductive.
Yes. So I didn't mix the last one. I exported 4 individual microphone tracks, and it was mixed by
Gabriel's note by AI voice. No, it was not mixed by me. I assumed because I work with the best audio engineers that it was ready. So, not my fault. Thank you.
Which, I don't know. If we're throwing him under the bus a little bit, are we throwing him under?
Yeah, send it.
Is this
Just let it loose on him.
This isn't like, it's just,
This is not real shade, but just...
It's not real shade, because
just
Gabriel
shed
is like...
some, leaf shade.
I didn't, it wasn't like, I don't know, it's like, hey, I need the files, we got to get it out. I'm like, okay, so I just exported the files. I didn't...
Well, it's because the rig was at the upper room recording.
That's true.
And we had to get it out of there. Yeah.
That's true.
I understand why.
And the fire alarm went off 10 times and shut everything down repeatedly, which was way fun.
Thankfully, we had saved.
Yes, we had
Oh,
saved.
that was hours later.
Hours later.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was fun.
Can we just talk about Rings of Power for maybe
Yes.
45 seconds?
Before we bring that up, yes, I'm wearing 2 different shoes. Yes, one of them is a chancla with a white sock because I rolled my ankle.
His
because
ankle is very...
I'm blaming my children because when you have kids, they are the reason of all your frustrations and also all of your joy.
Ah, yes.
And they are the scapegoats for everything.
For you just having a classic dad injury.
I was going to wear my cowboy boots, but I put one boot on and then my swollen foot wouldn't fit in the other one. And then the level changed. I couldn't. It was super painful to walk with a boot and then a sandal.
Yes.
Would have been more of a vibe than my Christmas slipper.
Yeah.
And my chancla. That's what I learned that from my wife. It's a Hispanic way of calling it. It's a flip flop.
A chancleta.
Chancla.
Yes.
I don't know what that means.
Chancla.
Anyway,
it's it's what you get hit with by your abuela.
Yes.
If you misbehave.
Yes, that's true. All true.
Not saying that that's happened to me, of course, but
okay,
it hasn't. No, she didn't. She didn't ever spank me.
Are you all caught up on Rings of Power?
I'm fully caught up.
I am as well.
Oh my goodness! I'm not gonna lie. Season 2 it's actually surpassed my expectations by quite a margin.
Yes,
and I had pretty high expectations after the trailer.
The trailer for sure, yeah. I was very underwhelmed by season 1 because, they're butchering the lore, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Rights.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It was set up for disaster, but I think they've near redeemed it with how good this season has been.
It's moved certainly a lot quicker than last season, and they're super time. If you don't care about this, skip forward.
Yeah, just skip forward to some timestamp that we'll specify later.
Which we'll forget about and won't happen.
We'll definitely forget. Yeah, just listen.
Literally, they have time compressed everything. Sauron's supposed to go to Numenor as Anatar at some point, and then that's before the rings are made. And it's just whole thing. And then that's after. That's after the rings are made. And then when Numenor collapses.
For the 9.
Yeah, when Numenor collapses, that's when Sauron gets disembodied again.
Yep.
Into the sea.
I'm not going to lie. Homeboy that plays Sauron, what's his name again? The actor, I forget. I was just looking at him Instagram today.
Sauron.
Halbrand. Anatar. Sauron.
The actor formerly known as Halbrand.
Yes.
That we all know Sauron in the worst disguise ever.
He's absolutely smashed it.
That's true, bro. The beginning sequence when he was disembodied and he was the primordial goo.
That sequence was
nice.
Pretty sick.
That was nice.
There was nothing cheesy about it.
I like how they're
epic, yeah.
I like how they're a little bit more violent than the movies.
Mm-hmm.
They're okay with showing limbs being detached and
But it's not
more
out of
bloody.
control.
Yeah.
Where like kids could never watch it. It's not quite.
It is more intense. There are some more intense scenes.
I think the scene in the first one, when Toriel is like defending himself against that orc and like stabs his eye and then that whole thing.
That's nice.
That sequence is a bit much.
Just kidding.
Like
it's not nice.
my wife would not want to watch that.
Yeah.
But it's funny. Then we'll move on here, unless you have more comments.
No.
I was explaining to my boys yesterday in the car, in earshot of my wife. I was explaining because she was sitting next to me in the passenger seat. I was explaining the sequence of why the Rings of Power. Like why, because I had just watched this 40-minute Nerd of the Rings video explaining the Rings of Power.
That dude's a legend, by the way.
Oh my gosh, and he's having a field day right now.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's like
We'll tag you in this
it's
video.
like he's selling KN95s during COVID right now.
Yeah.
That guy.
Yeah,
like
right.
literally.
Yeah.
But he I was just explaining to them how it went from Morgoth, the elves came from Valinor, defeated them, that whole thing, and then Sauron escaped, and then this whole thing started, and then they were like, "Well, why did he make the rings?" Is because it's actually exactly the tactic that the devil used with Jesus, which is I didn't even realize it when I said it, but he essentially used the idea of like the best way to control someone is actually to give them power.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Bestow power on them, and then it's really, really easy to control them because they feel like they gained.
Yeah.
It's like the whole concept of private equity. That's the whole thing. Like you make an investment in someone, but now they're kind of indebted to you a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting. That's so insightful to me because like everything in politics, that's all that it is, right?
Power equals control.
Yes. Like, okay, I'm giving you this power. I'm giving you these rings, but now that is part of me. There's a tie between that and me, and now I actually kind of control you. And you get to live a life with some power, but actually
It's on a leash.
Yeah, exactly, which I think is just deeply profound.
You know, it's funny that this is completely not as profound as what you were saying, but I just, my kids this last week watched Wreck-It Ralph for the first time. And some of y'all know where I'm going with this. In the beginning of that movie, Ralph doesn't want to be a bad guy.
Yeah.
Right. And so he goes to this AA meeting of sorts with all the bad guys.
All the bad guys, yeah.
And one of them is Satan. He's like, it's the devil. And they're all introducing themselves, and this guy said, and this is Satan. And he goes, oh, no, it's Satine. Like in a British accent. It's made me laugh so hard.
Oh my gosh.
I'm telling you, when you have kids, your standards just drop to the floor.
Oh no, there's really good
laugh.
content in there.
Yep. Anyway,
I can tell they take a lot of time to make sure that stuff's hilarious for parents, you know, and kids are just like. But there's funny, there's funny. Did you see Inside Out 2?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was really well made.
I did cry a little bit.
It was intense, and I thought it was going to take a really concerning turn, and they didn't. They kind of like pump fake that whole concerning community.
Yes,
and I was with that.
Very, very politically apt of you just now.
Yes,
concerning.
Yes. They just kind of pump fake.
We won't mention it.
We won't mention anything. Carrying on. Yes, very good.
No, great movie though. All those movies are really good. There's, I have more thoughts, but let's talk about stuff that people care about.
Yeah, what are we going to talk about actually? Did we just decide?
We are deciding right now, and it's...
I think we should just talk about what would everyone like to hear about.
We're going to talk about drums.
You want to talk about drums? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we never released that.
Well, we did record an episode about drums, and then it got lost.
For reasons that we won't go into
We won't go into. But it rhymes with Schmabriel. I was going to say Schmabriel.
It rhymes with Galadriel.
No. Anyway, storage is hard.
Yeah. We're not as put together as we seem.
It's true. We don't seem very put together at all.
Yes.
It's okay. But we should talk about drums because we did a whole like hour and a half long thing.
Yeah. So okay. So we're going to talk about drums. I'm going back into that. Mm-hmm. We're going to talk about drums. All of us know that do audio. Drums is about 50 to 60% of mixing, especially live music, just because it's all these different sources that we're trying to make act like one instrument, and they really determine the energy of the music in or they have a big equity position in that.
Everything is about investment.
Yes, of course. And yeah, I think, when I was coming up, like I remember there was a couple of videos I would watch all the time, but they didn't really explain to me like the tricks.
Yeah.
I just saw like ideas, but then I heard drums live a few times where I was like, oh my gosh. I was playing that like silly Coldplay video for you, but I remember I like heard this live snare drum. It was the day I like fell in love with audio. And I was already doing it, but it was the day I fell in love with it. It was this live show Coldplay video. I don't even think that was the one that I pulled up, but I just heard like a snare that definitely wasn't it. Mm-hmm. But I heard a snare that was like from a live recording, and it sounded like a polished snare sound.
It was nice. Yeah.
It was nice. And I was like, what? How does that drum sound that way?
Yeah.
And it like made the music sound good to my ears. Like,
yeah.
And I would love for everyone to just kind of like get a lot of that stuff demystified. So the title of this is Demystifying Drums. I just decided.
Yes, right now.
Yeah, just good. Now. Yes, good title.
So I have a question then.
Yep.
What specifically, like when you think like, oh, this is great, I like this. What, man? Like, the page turn keeps going. And
it makes me nervous. Yeah,
all of us Pro Tools users have trauma around
from the page.
Like, well, CPU overload. Like I bought a Mac Studio with the biggest chip in the world at 3 million gigs of RAM,
and it can handle 2 channels.
Remember that time we recorded at we recorded at 192. We did the whole pot. It was like an hour and some.
Yes, something. Thank you, Tim Cook and Steve Jobs.
We just did it to do it, and I didn't know. I've never recorded anything.
It took about 4 days to upload it, but that's aside from the point. It doesn't matter. It was a giant waste of storage.
4 terabytes of 2 mics.
Yes.
Anyway, so what's the thing that like when you went to a concert the first time? For me, it was Dave Matthews Band in 2006.
Carter
at the Pepsi Center in Denver, and like it was the first song they were playing was Every Day, which is a song by Dave Matthews Band, and like Carter does this super sick fill. It's like like 2 kicks that just like shake the room, and I was like, oh my gosh, that energy for me is where it's like everything I do now. I'm trying to recreate that moment, like in my emotional situation.
Oh my gosh,
And so for you, what was that? Because it wasn't like Coldplay on a video; it was a concert, probably.
No, yeah. All right, 2 moments just came into my brain. One was I went to Madison, Wisconsin to see Local Natives, one of my favorite bands. All Local Natives fans out there can drop a comment because they're amazing. Yeah. Incredible band. I saw them at the Odeum, something like that, in Madison, Wisconsin. Very random. Me and 2 of my friends drove out there in my Volkswagen Beetle that I was driving for a little bit.
You drove a Beetle? I thought you were too tall.
Unfortunately, yes, I did. For a short period of time. Thankfully, it was a complicated situation for me because I was grateful to have a car, but it was a pretty suspect choice of car for a young male. But long story short, we go out there. In the opener, I don't even remember what the band was called. But the opener, whatever the front of house guy was doing, I just remember experiencing like that like physical punch. Like where there's just like, it was probably that EV rig that everyone had. What was it called? The RE, whatever? Not the RE. Remember the EV stackable rig that everyone had?
No.
Every venue?
EAW?
No, it's EV.
don't know.
There's an EV rig. Someone knows.
Sorry.
Maybe you could put in the comments. Yeah. But there was an EV rig that like every venue had for a while.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a giant stack of older sound guys.
The Sirwin Vega subs.
Dude. Yes.
The Latin church.
No, dude. Literally. No, there was like the Metro in Chicago has it still, I think. So many venues had it. The punchiest rig ever. And it was just like one of those, it was made, they would do stadiums with it. Giant ground stacks for a stadium. Like Metallica was on it. Mick Hughes talks a lot about it in his stuff. But point is, I would just heard this guy playing, and I remember like he just like gets going in the kick and the toms and snare, and I was just like,
whoa.
You know, I was getting like really, really punched with it, like really hard, but it wasn't that loud. Yeah. Like the transients were just absolutely just the low end transient were dialed, and I was like, they could be playing any music. This just physically feels so good.
Yeah,
it just felt good physically, and that was one. And then also, which I talked about that John Mark McMillan show. That's the other memory that comes to my mind because I remember it was the same thing. It was he just had like. It was hearing a polished snare live where I was like, whoa, you know how that feeling is.
Was that pre or post Sloppy Wet Kiss?
That was
the
post.
fact that we don't reference the song name, we reference the line in the song.
He wrote that?
Yeah.
I totally forgot that.
Yeah.
That's so random.
Sloppy Wet Kiss. Dude. After having kids, that line hits way different.
Yes.
It's the way your kids kiss you.
It is. Yes. Yeah.
Yep.
I remember my church omitted that line from the song.
Same. We did the Chris Tomlin version, which was G-rated.
Yes. Just far less intimate with the Lord.
Oh, we're going to pull that out.
No, I'm just saying it's actually less intimate.
Anyway.
That wasn't like a negative. Whatever. So, yeah, I think those are big moments. Hearing... You know, it's like, I think early for guys, it's like the kick drum. When you just feel that kick drum go through your chest.
It's like me and youth group, I was the sound guy and the drummer, which was never a good combination. So I had these Mackie 15-inch powered subs.
Everyone had those.
And I put them on either side of the drum set.
Mackie was making an absolute obliteration of a killing for a few years in there.
Like, and it was the worst as a hybrid drum set. It was the worst. You'd think hybrid, okay, your snare and your cymbals will be fake. No.
That's what was real?
No. I used the real snare, real cymbals, and the electric kick drum, and the electric toms.
It makes no sense. The two quietest things.
Guys. But let me tell you, I made that kick drum, I put the subs right next to me, and I just like... You know, it was like shaking the world, and the booth was in the crow's nest area, you know, and I could tell when the guy running sound would turn it down. I would turn it back up.
You were just getting mad,
and I had a double pedal, guys. Oh,
you were doing all of it.
I had all of it. Dude.
You were playing. He loves us like
heavily influenced. No, this was before how he loves us.
Oh yes, what were you playing with this? Your love never fails.
Salvation is here. No.
Oh, dude.
That like 2004 was when this was happening. Like that bass solo in that song. And I was just
going absolute.
And then like
August Burns Red on it.
The worship leader would turn around and say, "Stop."
Yeah, exactly. This is so unnecessary. You were just
like machine gun kick drums. Oh man, let me tell you guys.
And you had a China symbol.
I did have a China. It was a Wuhan 12-inch.
The Wuhan, dude. Why was that with like $80?
It was cheaper. I think I got it for like 45 or 50.
Dude, the Wuhan, I was full COVID on my drum set, dude.
That's nice.
I was all Wuhan.
I ironically named Wuhan. Illuminati knows about all this, I'm sure. But anyway, continue about the energy of the experience.
Yeah, I think that was the big thing. And like hearing, I think we were used in church, like, because the PA was never sufficient in any church that I was in.
Yeah.
I was used to hearing the cymbals like so loud and obnoxious. That was just what I was accustomed to. And the snare like being a weird high frequency, like annoying thing. And then the kick being like weak. And then all of a sudden, like, I know the guy was hitting the cymbals hard, but it didn't matter because there was so much energy coming from the PA for the kick and the toms and everything. And contextually, my ears were fine with it.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, it was probably twice as loud as what I was usually hearing.
Yeah.
And like once I experienced that, I was like, oh my goodness, why can't I be behind? Like, why can't I produce this?
Yeah.
This would be so fun. And then I start getting frustrated
And then
about
your,
the PA.
your church finance officer told you this is why we can't have this at church.
I was trying to convince them to buy all different types of pre-owned stuff because I was just like, we need more subs. We need more subs. I watched some video at some point and it was just like, you need more subs. That was the point of the video.
It was Dave Rat explaining the way subs work.
It probably was. And it was like, you just need more headroom and you can get that. Your tops are probably fine.
Yeah.
You just need more headroom on the low end and you can make the whole mix feel like a concert. And I was like, that's what we need.
The church I grew up in, we had 4 turbo sound. I don't know what model they were. I was young, but 4 turbo sound, like individual hangs, and they put the 4 subs, the turbo sound subs that came with that, like at the back of the stage, like basically off, and then I'd started doing sound and I would just turn those up. Just there's a little aux knob, on the DDA. Is it DDA console? It's a British console. No, DDA.
Oh, DDA brand?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was an analog board.
Analog desk.
Anyway.
Yes.
Yep. All the knobs. It was really fun. Just trying to kick up.
Physically feeling it. I think drums are the things that create the physical experience. Obviously bass guitar, but that's just like a sustain. I think finding a way to like create a physical experience for people, even with records, same thing.
Yeah.
It should be a physical experience. Like if they have any type of listening platform that like can support that in any way, should be physical but then it's still contained and it fits in the music.
Physical on your AirPods.
Literally. Ooh. There's literally like, like that song I just played, Arizona by Kings of Leon, like that snare for some reason, it's not even that thick, but like me and Gabrielle were just listening to it in Florida last week and it's just like, and it just hits you like, but it's almost like it like hits you in the throat. It's not like in the chest.
It's very like upper mid tuning.
In the
They're
face.
not cutting any of that low mid thing that we normally cut in the worship snare.
Oh, dude.
Sound. Like there's none of that. It's like all mid range.
They just increased the top end. That's all they did. And then sent it to rooms and reverbs and stuff. And it's like, and I'm just like, and it's so in phase. And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I'm into. But all right, so talk to me. You start working on mixing some drums. What's the first thing that you're trying to accomplish? And then how do you do it?
Okay, so I mean, like, say we're live, we're doing it in the room, and there's a band on stage and they're playing. Obviously, it's like sound check, kick, snare, toms. You want to hear everything. When you get to snare, if you have one kick mic, it's easy. You don't have to worry about phase a lot. Typically, if I have 2 kick mics, I will only use one, and then make it sound good, and then copy those settings over to the other channel, and just see where it's at phase wise. Because if there's one in and out, and then one out, they're like 6 or 8 inches away from each other, so they're not perfectly in phase together. So some people do it by like delaying the kick in mic, I don't know, a tiny amount to the out. But most of the time it's easier, for me at least, that I'll use one of them, or EQ it in a way that's like, it's not interfering in a phase relationship.
So you're not using the kick in more for the attack and the kick out more for the low end?
Yeah, I don't want to like, because the sound together, I feel like is the special part, right? When they're both getting the full range. And more often than not, you have to run them quieter.
Yeah.
Because, because it's just too much information most of the time. But I feel like if you start like butchering things, chopping out everything below 300 on kick in, like you start getting into weird areas.
Territory. Yeah.
And the Beta 91 is Nat. The Beta 91 is a great microphone. It's unbelievably good. And
the low end it gets even from right there.
The sound is amazing, and there's no reason to cut low. I think people would be shocked if they just use that mic.
Right, you need one. That's what you're going with.
That's what I go with.
Yeah,
for
same.
I mean, the D6 is great as well, obviously.
But the attack, the transient is not going to be exactly the same. And then I think how well the drum is tuned.
It depends on how you mix drums too, because like some people don't want a lot of transient on their kick drum.
Yeah.
And I typically I want to hear, but I want to hear the transient, but I don't want to like get destroyed by the transient.
Yeah.
You know? So
I'm super. Have you noticed that I'm ultra chill with the kick transient?
I think most people like that sound better.
I'm really dark with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is like, it just becomes this like supporting factor. Do you feel like when you first started mixing drums, the kick was this huge deal and it became less of a huge deal, or no?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think the kick became less. I think that you realize that the mix is more important than just the kick drum, you know. But anyway, so moving to snare, it's you know, your snare top, snare bottom. Mic placement is key for all of this with overheads and snare top, snare bottom, right? Like the angles and all those things. I think that we should probably talk more in depth about like how to mic drums well. But that's like the most important part about all this, besides input gain. You know, like,
well, let's just move one by one then. So we'll talk bus stuff at the end, I guess, because that's the true secret sauce. But
is it? I don't know. I think it's miking.
All right. Well, let's talk about kick a second. Let's close that out before you get into snare, because I think kick and snares and then overheads is probably 80% of the conversation, 90%.
A large percent.
Yeah, large percentage. Majority shareholder. I'm joking. When it comes to kick, so I heard you say Beta 91 on the in and D6 on the out. That's your preferred combo?
So I like the D6. If I'm going to pick a different mic,
no budget.
I think I've really loved Braxton turned me onto this DPA kick mic, the 4055, I think.
You'd take it over the D6, great. You think?
Well, my experience with DPA has been they're super shiny mics.
Yeah.
And I'm not like super into super shiny sounds, but that DPA is not a shiny kick mic, the 4055. It's a condenser, but it's not like ultra bright, which is interesting. It's kind of like a counterintuitive thing. It sounds really good. A lot of detail. It's pretty great. I love the M82 as well. The M82 is super punchy, Telefunken. RE20 obviously kind of a old school.
The M82 has like that 60 hertz, real 60 hertz bump in it, right?
It has there's two options. There's like a switch on it that has a mid cut, which the Beta 91 does, and most mics I think have an option.
The D6 is built in super scoop.
Yes, that's why some people like it. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
But I like all those cuts. I don't like boosts. I don't like it when that boosts top end.
Yeah, you can always boost it yourself.
And, you know, like it's all depending on how the drum sounds, of course, and all this other stuff. But one of those three, probably right now, I'd pick the DPA
over anything. Yeah,
just to try it. You know, like
okay. Then what's your chain?
You'll quickly realize that there's nothing special about the chain. It's just like I'll use like an SSL channel, doing all the stuff, using all the functions, and then like an F6 or something afterwards just to fix any issues that may still happen after all the processing. So that's really it. I think that you can get most of a good kick sound with one plugin that does something reasonably well. Yeah.
Do you ever use transient designers on kicks?
I
like Smack Attack or anything?
No, because it boosts not just the top end, like the transient. It's like the full range of that transient. So it's like 20K to 20, you know, so it's everything.
Why is that acceptable on snare but not on kick?
Because because kick I think it's not the thing depending in situations that I've been in, it's not the thing I'm struggling for consistency with.
The kick.
Right? Like if there are super inconsistent kick hitters, me putting a transient designer on the front end isn't going to help that.
No.
It's going to probably make it worse because it's right. And it's the thing you don't really want to get worse because it will affect everything in a much more
energy
drastic
of everything,
way.
yeah.
Like goes through the subs at like 10x volume because it hit that threshold. Now it's like, the snare I think is a little bit more like it's most people are better and more consistent at hitting snare than they are at hitting kick, right? And it's easier to dial it in really with precision.
Yeah,
I think. That's just my 2 cents.
No, I'd agree with that. Yeah, that makes sense to me.
But I mean, I've never needed a transient designer on the kick drum.
On kick, yeah. Okay, yeah. So and then that kick out mic, where are you putting it?
Just inside the porthole, just inside. So like where the diaphragm is just barely past the edge of the head. And the reason for that is because if you're outside the hole or like on the outside area of the hole, it's just wind. It's a lot of wind that you're getting from all the air pressure moving out. If you just go inside the hole, your tonal difference will be minimal, but you won't get any of the wind because the wind's behind the mic, behind the diaphragm.
Which that just loosens that transient because it's like,
yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway.
Okay. Yeah.
I've not used sub kicks a lot, having in the most recent years, right? But they do have a use, I'm sure, in certain environments.
In some context that has nothing to do with this. No, I'm joking.
Yes, but it's just a speaker wired backwards. That's
I mean, it's a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So let's talk then. Someone wants to improve on mixing kick. Let's just close this out.
Just the kick.
Yeah, just the kick. They want to do better with the kick. What should they focus on?
Mic placement and tuning.
That's great.
Yeah, I do typically like finger tight on both attack and reso heads.
Yes.
But the baffling that's on the inside of the kick, you need some. It
What do
has
you
to be
use,
some.
towels.
Yeah, towels or like a pillow is great. Like a medium density pillow. And then move. I always have like that pillow, whatever's in the kick, against the reso head, against the resonant head, not the batter head.
Very good.
Yeah. So like push it against, so it's like absorbing that happens after the.
Yeah, it's going to keep the resonance tighter, not necessarily affect the
tone,
the beater. Yeah.
Yep. But you need something to absorb the sound of the wood, like the ultra high like resonance of the wood. Otherwise, like your kick will sound like a tin can.
Yes.
It will have all that low end, but the tin can sound overwhelms everything because you can't EQ it out. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. Well, if you want to improve your kick sound, that's something you could try. Just move add a pillow or towel. I think that's great. I remember when that
the EMAD.
When I first did that. Yeah, I remember when I first I had this like big like grandma's house comforter, like the thick ones. And it has like flowers on it, those ones.
Yeah. She hand sewed it in the 1920s. Yeah.
Yes.
Yep. Family heirloom.
Yes. I remember I put one of those in the kick drum at my house, and then I wanted to play drums way more because of just how it felt in my room. Yeah. And I carried that into doing live sound, and it helped me a lot.
Yeah.
Because I was like, okay, that's the source. Like, sounds like that right here.
You mean what you put a microphone on has to sound good? What?
That is the main moral of the story. Okay, snare. So you talked about mic positioning. Talk to me about what microphones and what's the key to the mic positioning.
So all of my selections would be exactly the same as Chris Greeley. So whatever that guy picks, I pick.
Yes,
right?
Great.
Which if you pick something else, you're wrong.
Yes. Right, very good.
I'm just kidding.
Moving on, next point.
No, I think Bethel really like made the 545, the 57 545, not the 57, but the 545 really popular, and everyone was so impressed with the way Bethel sounded live that they adopted the way that they mic stuff, and so everything that we're doing is very heavily influenced by that. But the 545 is an unbelievable microphone.
Yeah.
It's just so good. It's like it's essentially exactly the same as a 57, dynamic range wise, except it has a switch.
Yeah.
And if you don't lock the switch on, it will come back and bite you because someone will turn it off, and then you'll wonder why I don't have snare top.
Anyway, that's not good.
But it's a slightly different EQ curve. It's a little bit brighter than a 57. And
does it have the upper mid bump and the high bump, or is it just the high bump?
I think it's both.
I'm saying because I looked at the
sheet.
Yeah, there's the presence range, pretty much like 2 to 3K bump in a 58 and a 57.
Yeah.
Did it just move it up, or is it just also adding top end?
I honestly don't know. I'd have to look at the frequency response sheet.
Mm-hmm.
I would assume it's got both.
Yeah.
Because part of the dynamic range is based on
that bump in the upper mid.
Like what is the EQ curve doing to the volume of what you're hearing?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that is a factor.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, that's fair.
And upper mids, if you cut upper mids, you'll have to boost the volume of the mic, right? Because you're cutting. Anyway, and versus top end, it's easier to get away with, like, because the frequency ranges are thinner, the hertz are much shorter. Like, you can get away with a lot more top end and not affect your volume.
Yep, that's great. So. Okay, so when it comes to the processing, all right, so I know snare top, just a 20-second on the mic positioning, and then let's move to processing.
Mm-hmm. So it depends on, like, the tuning of assume the tuning's great, assume everything's great. So what I would do is, if you're the rim of your snare drum, let's zoom in on the table. This is the snare drum. This is a 16-inch snare drum.
Yeah, that's a gigantic snare.
You want to be, like, kind of just over the edge, right?
The Philistine Army snares.
Almost parallel with the snare. Yes.
Why is that so important?
Because the more vertical you go, the more, like, body and tone you'll get, and the less defined attack you'll get. The sound of the snare is the sound of this. It's two things. It's the sound of the stick hitting the drum, and the sound of the bottom responding to that. So between both top and bottom, you get the full picture. Now, if you do this, you lose. If you go more vertical, you lose a lot of the attack. You can't really get it back. Yeah. So it's not like a lot of EQ you can do to get around it because you're not hearing it. The mic's not hearing it. So if you do that, you can easily add low end, because that low end frequency, that proximity effect, especially if you're using overheads in the way that I do, in the way that we do, that the beef of the snare drum will still be there, but you can't get around not having the attack. So, and the bottom as well, it's like that whole, like, miking in line with the strainers. So, like, the strainers being, like, north-south, just like the mics are, in the same direction, not horizontal or perpendicular. That's important. That's again a Chris Greeley thing that we heard, 10 years ago. And we're like, this is amazing.
Changed my life.
Everyone do this. And it's true. Like, there's an immense value to the way the source sounds and the way that the mics are hearing the source. So, if your drummer has a problem turning the snare drum to where the throw is on the top or the bottom, I would just
send him on leave.
No, I'd just explain that, like, your interest is in him sounding good.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say, I think for a long time, obviously I didn't understand snare. I wasn't dealing with great snare drums themselves.
Yeah.
But I've heard bad snare drums sound okay.
Yeah.
I think a lot of my snares sound like this. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, if you're dealing with that, the snare top mic, I would guess, is probably positioned like this. because you're getting so much more of the resonance than you want to hear the drum almost like you're hearing it from, like, as far as I am from this table. That sound usually sounds really good, even on fairly cheap snares. But it's like, okay, well, if we put the mics this far away, we're going to hear everything else. We can't do that. Let's put them close so that we isolate this source, but then now we have to try to get back to this sound. That's how I think about it. And I think what you were saying about the top mic is, like, okay, this is the closest thing that we can do to get a balance of the resonance and the attack and still isolate this source.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
It's like the happiest compromise we can make, but then our gates will still work. It's like the marriage of all three of those things. And also I think like the air factor, you know, like when you feel like you get a little bit of like, well, it's kind of like that boom, boom, but like, especially if the guy opens up the snare and he does like a boop, boom.
Yep. Turns the strainers off.
Yeah, he turns the strainers off and you get like way more of that like low frequency. If that's feeling out of control, I think just like one trick I've learned from you is like, one, don't add as much low end on that top mic. You don't probably need that much. You just need to make sure it's tuned well and the overheads are in phase. But two is you're probably angled a little too much down as well. See if you can creep that back and maybe you can make it work.
Yeah.
You know?
And yeah, for sure gates help with that too, some of those overtones. But with bottom, it's about, three, same idea with the angling, right? But I typically go 3 to 5 inches away, aim downline at the strainers. So top and bottom are like, they're like doing this effectively, or maybe like, something like that.
Yeah, bottom's a little bit more angled up just because.
Yeah. In the studio, I've tried a couple times where we, like, you have the top aim like this, and I put the bottom on the opposite side. So it'd be like underneath the drummer's legs. And so the mics are both perfectly 180 degrees out of phase with each other.
And then you flip it.
Then you flip it. Then it's fully in phase. So even when you flip phase, when it's like this, it did sound better. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was because my ears are used to hearing a little bit of like phase interaction.
Phasing, yeah.
Or it's like, like maybe it's, I don't know. There's some weird things. You got to do some more experimenting, but yeah.
That's cool.
It is
I
cool.
like it.
Yeah.
All right, and then talk me through, so what I'm used to seeing on the chain is pretty much SSL channel, and then
2 of those actually.
Yeah, one for the gate and then one for EQ and a little bit of compression, and then smack attack. It
depends. I think. Well, at the church right now, I'm not sure. Not sure what's on there. But yeah, the first channel, the SSL gate is great. So it's like have it like in kind of a expander mode.
Yeah.
And I've seen guys like when there's in a soft dynamic moment, they're trying to like turn the range down on that one channel strip because it's just doing all their processing, but they don't want to bypass it because then you lost all your processing. You just want to turn the gate off. So they turn the range down and like it's grabbing a little knob. And so I kind of simplified that idea and put another instance of the same plugin just doing the gate so I could just bypass that plugin. And the SSL channel is near zero, if not zero latency on most applications. So you don't like there's not like a delay compensation penalty you'll pay because of you bypass something. So anyway, yeah. So that's kind of like I use like the EV2 channel strip I've been digging lately. I think that's which is SSL's their Waves new version.
In live?
Yeah.
And we're not using it. Why?
We are using it.
We are?
Yeah.
On the front of house rigs? That's news to me.
No, not on
the broadcast rigs.
At upper room. On that one, it's on the air.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say for Audio Link.
No.
I haven't seen an instance of it yet.
It's very expensive DSP wise, and so
yes,
that's why it's not on the front of house rigs. Anyway, but different conversation. So the 2 of those, one doing gate, one doing like EQ and compression and all that stuff. Some guys like the 550 API or 550B, whichever one.
The graphic one.
And it sounds great. I just for my purposes, I've liked the SSL just because, it's one place instead of 2 places and to look. And depending on the drummer and the instance, I might add a transient designer, smack attack, or whatever else. And then another, like an EQ at the end if there's any problem areas. I did have a season where I liked R-Bass on snare.
Yeah, you've gone away from it.
But I moved away from that because at the time when that was sounding really good, like we were in a conical drum cage, and it was kind of like our bass was on the snare top was overcoming the phase incoherence inside the cage.
The first week I came to Upper Room, that R bass, you were running it. You're probably running 3 of them on it.
No, it was. Do you
remember that weekend?
129. So 129 was the on R bass, the root frequency I was using, and it wasn't given that much.
129.
Yeah, it's really low,
dude. It was huge.
Yeah,
but it was.
It was good.
That was great. Yeah, that was a lot to process.
Depending on like, I've just noticed like, and now we have like an amazing drum cage that's like unbelievably built, and like none of the panels are parallel, even though it looks like a square. It's like sonically perfect in that. So it sounds like a small drum cage in a studio.
Yeah,
that's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just the phase stuff gets so easy when you realize you're not having to compensate for the room or the situation's imperfections. That's like great. It's so I got moved away from R bass, moved away from a couple other things. I think I was like side chaining snare in the overheads at a certain point, which I'm not doing anymore.
Snare top to that low band on the overhead
on the C6.
C6, yeah, to boost it,
just to help it feel full more consistently. And it worked, you know, for the time it worked. But all that is like
doing that.
I haven't been doing it. No. It's like cool when you're overcoming, when you have to overcome problems. It's good to know tricks to get around it.
Yeah.
But I haven't been able to like make it work in the new room because I'm not.
You're
like,
spoiled with
it's
everything
like unnecessary.
Being perfect. Yeah.
It's like It's so because it's unnecessary. I feel like it makes it worse, and so I have moved away from it. But anyway.
So talk about the overheads a second, and then we'll talk about Tom's last because I think it's the simplest. Talk about the overheads in relationship to everything, and then generally processing that you're doing, and then we'll talk about buses and rap.
Skip toms because they're not important toms.
Yeah, no one really cares. Anyone named Tom is just not even slightly significant in this earth.
So overheads are like it's miking the entire drum set, not just the cymbals. And I know that's like a pretty common thing now. We all know that. But I still see a lot of guys like high passing the overheads up to 300 or more. And they're kind of missing all the body of the drum set. And the overheads, because they're a little bit more removed from the skins, they have a much fuller view of the kit. It's like everything sounds better. Everything sounds a little more full because they're not dealing with the inconsistencies of the drummer like the close mics are. So what I'll do is, and again, the Greeley method, coining that phrase, maybe the Greeley method.
Yes, it's
the measuring from the top right lug closest to the kick drum to each overhead, and then from the overheads to each other to make a triangle. That is effectively what I do, except I move that location from the top right lug to the center of the snare, because I noticed that when I do the top right lug, the image is a little off kilter. It's like the snare is a little bit louder in left, overhead left, drummer perspective. And I don't know if I don't like that live as much.
Yeah.
And that's just my preference, right? There's nothing wrong about it. Like, but the thing is, the overheads, the loudest thing in the overheads is going to be the snare, the most dominant thing. Like, no one's going to hear the kick drum through the overheads. You know? And so, because that's all getting, you know, like you might hear the attack, but you're not going to hear the body of the drum.
Yeah, more the rattle from the snare bottom than anything else. Yeah,
exactly. So I basically took that principle, altered it a little bit, and now we do center snare to the overheads, and that way, like, your snare can be the focal point, and you still maintain the stereo image of toms left and right. Your cymbals are still like left and right. That image doesn't get sacrificed by moving that position. So that way, when you hit the snare, the sound arrives at both locations simultaneously.
Can you talk about verbs a little bit? Sorry, I'm making you do all the talking.
No, it's okay.
Verbs.
I like to talk.
Yes, good. That's why we're here. Carry on.
Indeed. So there's like, some guys use tom verb. I don't use tom verb because I don't like tom. verbs. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's like there's like a drum verb, like a big long verb, and then I use a gated verb again, the Greeley method. It's like I'm taking everything from this guy.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
But like that's kind of the way this community works, though. Like you find stuff you like and you apply it to what you do.
Yeah, and maybe you could improve it for your context.
Yeah, and sometimes it's not necessary every time, but for like big worship stuff, it's pretty effective. That gated verb is great. There's it's only on snare bottom, and it's made to feel like an extension of the drum.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps if you add like a short gated verb to your snare bottom channel, not the direct channel, but like on an aux, and mix it in with the rest of the drum set, like it's another drum, right?
Mm-hmm.
At least that's what I do. It goes through all the same bus processing and everything else. I think it makes the snare feel longer, and because it's such a big, like, transient hit, boom, it's not done so quickly that it feels like it's like just
gone,
right? But if you add something like that helps make the sustain a little bit more, okay, I can identify with what that is, and it helps it feel big and epic. That's what I do, and it's obviously very subjective. It doesn't work on every snare drum. Like not every snare drum needs that. Some are supposed to feel really tight,
Yeah.
And that's the sound. And that's great. But for big worship stuff, I think that's what I found to be most effective. And like a big drum verb as well, that all the toms and the snare go through. Like that big like ballad.
Yep.
With a 15-second decay.
Yeah, how long is the decay on your main drum verb?
I don't know. I think it's 2 seconds.
I feel like this moves around all the time.
It's not more
What waves verb do you do? R-verb?
It's not more than 2.5 seconds.
Yeah.
It's probably 2 seconds.
What waves verb do you do if you're just using Super Rag?
R-verb's great.
R-verb plate?
Yeah, the default loading setting is great. There's a room setting that's nice as well, but they're all like have different purposes, and not every verb sounds great on every drum set.
Yeah.
So, excuse me, if I had Valhalla,
that's another story.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Okay, so really quick, I was thinking about how important the buses are, and how some people have like
the significance of time.
Yes. I was thinking about the significance of the buses.
Oh, and the buses and how they're being significant is significant.
Where we are today and where those that came before us were before they came before us. In proportion to where we are now and where we might be tomorrow,
so we can
if it were today.
So we can be unburdened by what has been.
Or what has been, as we are now.
Sorry.
Now that you're all confused out of your brains, moving on to our next point. So the bus is like, I feel like we do all these things to like make the like ingredients right, and then like the buses kind of like mix it all together to make it all behave within the music.
Yep.
That's kind of how I view it.
Behave.
Yes. Talk to me when it comes to, I know typically we have the 3 buses, the dry, the crush, and the kick snare.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk through like what are you trying to accomplish with each one? What should each one sound like if you describe it by itself? And then what do they do together?
Okay, dry is dry. It's basically, first of all, I treat like drum verbs as part of the kit. And some guys do not do that. They don't put the drum verbs through their buses because if you compress reverb, it just makes it louder and messy. And I think for the most part, that's true if you don't have a dry signal. Having said that, if you do have a dry signal like we do, the dry is just the natural verb sound. The crush, the parallel compression is all the same instruments, like the overheads, the dry, the skins, and all that stuff, and the reverbs going through a crush channel. The difference is I'm not having to push the verbs quite as hard because they're getting compressed. but it feels more natural to me. It feels like I can make it work in the context of the mix better. Now, if you solo the drums by themselves, it might sound like it's way too loud, like the verbs. But in the context of the mix, a lot of those verbs go away and they get lost. And so having it go through some compression is actually kind of nice sometimes because it helps keep them present, and that gives your mix some size, you know. Which that's debatable. Like some people will completely disagree with me. This is just the way.
Not everyone agrees about this.
No one agrees. No. That's kind of what I've liked, and I found that that's the most repeatable and like replicatable thing about like we can make a drum sound like this, and probably got a bad stigma, you know, from the 80s when verbs were so present. Yeah, and like you don't want to compress verb because in the words of Randy Adams, like you're compressing the size out of something. You're making it like defeats the purpose of like the verb. But I found that I kind of like the way that sounds in the context of a mix. So anyway, so there's the drum dry, the drum crush or parallel compression, and then a kick snare bus, which I haven't used until like the last couple of years. I always just kind of did drum dry, and
it's smearing the transient, or it's increasing the top of the transient.
It's for sure making it more pronounced, yeah. But like, depending on, it's just like giving some consistency to those two.
Got it. This is leveling all of them off.
Yeah, like, you know,
and then turning that up.
Yeah, like, I mean, it's effectively like taking like 10 dB out of already compressed signal, so it's like getting really destroyed. But it's giving you like a consistent attack.
And just blend that in.
And it helps like make it consistent. Yeah.
Yeah.
So when the drummer doesn't hit quite as hard, it still feels hard, right? And on the outside, because your layers of compression are all working together to give you a consistent sound.
Did you cover which plugins are doing each of those?
So I do the API 2500 on the dry, which is doing nothing. It's just there for my sanity.
Yep.
And then on the crush, the API 2500, literally it's the thing I've used for years, and it just sounds great.
The heavy comp preset.
The drum kit preset. Drum kit heavy comp. Boom.
Yep.
Do that. And I mean, if anything, I'm changing the output gain. That's it. It just feels...
It spanks.
When you blend it in, it feels so good. I've never changed it. So I used to use it on records, but I stopped doing that because I like the Chandler Zener limiter, which we have to talk about. That's a UAD plugin. Anyway, so yeah, and I learned that from a friend as well. Anyway, so and then the kick snare is a DBX 160. Just to
turn the threshold down until it's about 10 dB.
Yep, and there's an out gain. You can adjust the level. But yeah, if you don't have that one, use another API 2500 because it's such a good. Like it's very aggressive. It does all that stuff really well. You know. So, yep. That's basically it. And I mean, it's nice.
Yeah, I think thematically, like if everyone focuses on the drum tuning first, but then, you know, treating the drums as an instrument of their own first and making sure that they're right and not just like brushing over things, right? Like I think I did that for a long time. I would just like accept. I think when studio guys got involved in live sound, it just
then it got way better.
Live sound got way better because guys with expectations got involved. Yeah. Right? Guys with expectations, like, no, it should sound this PA.
Yeah.
If I put that speaker in my studio and ran a snare through it, it would sound sick. This is a sick speaker. Why can't it do that in this room if I have 20 of them, 40 of them?
Yeah.
It's that idea. And it's like...
That's really good insight. It's probably true. Probably what happened.
No, literally, it's like, well, why not? Well,
adding that to the list of questions I will ask the Lord in heaven.
Yes. Why did everyone just accept? Well, I think it was because of time constraints.
Yeah, for sure. Like festivals and whatever else, you have 10 minutes.
Live sound was about reinforcement at first, more than anything else, and it still is. But it wasn't about experiencing a record live. It was about just the fact that we could hear the band was like the survival stage, and then we got to like the specialized worker stage when studio guys got involved.
It was science. It was an art.
Exactly. Well, yeah, like Rupert Neve got into audio from doing public address. That's what he said, which is PA. He would set up PAs,
which is PA system, public address system.
So I just say it to say I think, we have a level of expectation. I think for everyone, just raising your expectations. Like, okay, listen to a record. There's no reason why a live experience can't sound like that, but a lot better, like a lot more physical, right? A lot more physical. Yeah. It can like at Upper Room. That's how it sounds. And when and I think it's just because first the expectations are there. Like, all right, it all should sound right. We're not just going to accept whatever. And then once you get in that place, you treat each of the drums with intentionality, and then it's dialing those skills. You know.
And then being able to do it fast. Right.
Yeah, that's mileage.
Expectation. What you said about expectations is super important. Yeah. Like understanding what is possible. And here's the thing: like if you're the sound guy at your church and you're like, the drummer's not cooperating with me, and like that's a real common. I feel like that's super common.
Yeah.
The drummer has his own idea of what it should be, and you have your own idea. The answer is not to bulldoze anyone. The answer is to build a relationship, because if the drummer understands that you are on their team and that you want them to sound better, and these are the steps we can do to make that. Like you can't do that without relationship and without there being a sense of unity, of purpose. That's all really, really important. And it's incumbent upon us, I think, to go into like with humility to approach it as a team.
What I wish I did was, like once I got into mixing for real, what I wish I did is brought the whole band in and said, okay, and like played some record and said, hey guys, this is what I'm trying to make it sound like in the PA. Are you guys with this? I'm trying to make it sound like this. Are you guys in favor of this? Because like this is what I'm trying to do. Anything south of this, I'm not that interested in. And then if like everyone was on board, just viewing it as like a business leader mind space, but like, all right, if everyone's on board with this, then like we're going to make adjustments until we can get that there.
Yeah.
Because I don't see why this isn't possible, right? Maybe we have to consider the acoustics of our room, but like maybe I can find someone to help me with that. Other than that, if we can start getting it close to this, that would be great. And I think raising the expectations is step one, and then you can like and share that with people. Like, hey, I want to make it sound so much better. You guys are great musicians. I want to make it sound so much better. Like, here's what I'm trying to do. I'm learning these resources. Here's what I want the drums to sound like live. Yeah. Are you on board with this? Every drummer, if you take a video on your phone of what it currently sounds like, and then you show them like a Bethel record or whatever, they're going to be like, yes, that's what I want it to sound like too. And you're like, okay, let's work on this. Okay, the snare is not tuned right. I think that's step one, is just like getting a shared vision. But
yep, for sure.
Yeah, that's just random stuff. Anything else you want to share about drums?
No, I think you've covered it all.
Great. Well, this was a lot of fun. If you guys have any questions, you can comment or DM us. We're on Instagram all the time. And if you're interested in AudioLink and you just want us to mix for you, we can do that too. So that's the thing. But yeah, super excited we got to talk about this. It's great.
Boom.
Adios.